Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's PacTrans webinar on effective technology transfer. My name is Cole Kopka. I'm the Assistant Director here at PacTrans. We have a great webinar scheduled for today. I just want to run over a few logistics for those of you who are new to joining our webinar. As you scroll over your screen, at the bottom of your screen, you're going to see two icons. One is for the chat box and the other is for the Q&A box. The chat box allows you to send comments to panelists. Please keep that to comments. And then if you have questions, we ask that you use the Q&A box. So the Q&A box, you are able to pose questions. You can do that throughout the presentations. We will get to those questions at the end during the discussion section. You can also see other people's questions. And as you see questions that you think are interesting, you can click the thumbs up button to upvote those. And so our list of questions will sort in order of what is most liked. It helps us prioritize the questions that the majority of the audience are interested in hearing about today. I think that's all. And so without further ado, I'm going to introduce our moderator for today. Jeff Ban is a professor of civil and environmental engineering here at the University of Washington. And he is also the Associate Director of Research for PacTrans. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff to introduce the content of the webinar and the speakers. Jeff, do you want to start your video and unmute yourself?
Thank you, Cole. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Tech Transfer webinar organized by PacTrans. And so this is a series of webinars we organized to try to emphasize tech transfer and how to convert university research into commercialization and practice. So today, I'm very, very pleased to have two renowned experts in this area for tech transfer and commercialization. Dr. Benouar and Dr. Amine Haoui. Many of us may know them, and they both have a long list of achievements in terms of tech transfer and commercialization. So I just wanted to highlight a few of those. I start with Dr. Benouar. So he is currently the owner and the managing director of Connected Transportation Systems and Networks. And before this, Hamid served as the VP for business development and government relations of Sensy networks. And under this role, he basically tried to grow the markets of Sensy networks and in different marketplaces. Before Sensys, Hamid served as the director of California Center for Innovative Transportation, CCIT, and CCIT focused on converting university research into commercialization and practice. And I wanted to mention that under his leadership, when he was the director, I was a postdoc at CCIT and worked under him for quite a few very interesting projects and learned a lot from that. Really greatly appreciate that experience. Before CCIT, Hamid worked for PacTrans for a long time and as a chief traffic engineer, which he managed a large operation of PacTrans. Hamid got his PhD from UC Berkeley and also a PE in California. So I move on to Dr. Haoui. Dr. Haoui is really an entrepreneur, and he was the CEO of Sensy Networks from 2003 to 2019. So we know Sensy Networks provides wireless detectors, traffic detectors for many cities in the world. And under his leadership, he's also the co-founder of the company. Under his leadership, the company grew from a 3-person startup to basically a large corporation that provides detectors to hundreds of cities and over 30 countries, including the city of Seattle, which our lab used the data to do our own research. Before Sensys, Amine served as the founding CEO of Deva Communications, which is a wireless local loop company. and also from 1985 to 1993, he lead the signal processing division at Technic-Run Communication Systems. Amine hold a PhD from UC Berkeley and got his MS and BS from Ann Arbor. So again, thank you both, Hamid and Amine, for giving this seminar. And without further ado, I will give the floor back to Hamid and Amine. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Let me share my screen with you guys. I'm happy to be here and share my experience with you in tech transfer. So I'm going to be talking about technology transfer today. And in the context of this presentation, what I mean by technology transfer is not, courses and seminars are very important, of course, the technology transfer, but I'm talking about taking a product, which could be software or hardware, from research or initial development through implementation to improve transportation safety, reduce congestion, reduce the impact on the environment, and often reduce the cost of the initial technology or maybe even the maintenance and operation of that technology. So that's what I'm going to be talking about. And I'll focus on 4 points. The first one is government agencies working with the universities can provide an environment that promotes transportation innovation. That's a very important point. The second one is talking about that technology development and refinement has to happen with end user participation. So pilots, trials, and so on have to have both the end user, the university, the private sector working together. And then I will also touch on some challenges. Some challenges include, of course, intellectual property and some sole source issues. And then also sometimes government funding comes with some strings attached that need to be kind of relaxed a little bit. So we'll be talking about that. And then finally, government and the universities are not going to do large-scale deployment. It has to be done by the private sector, and that's their role. So the private sector will be looking at financing, technology development, business development, and then Amine, of course, Amine Haoui is going to be talking about the census example. So the first one is, providing and nurturing this ecosystem that promotes technology transfer. The first thing is the end user participation. And so something I learned from a business development guru during my experience at Census Networks is that there are 3 types of people or end users. There are innovators, early adopters, and followers. The innovators are the ones that want to take technology, just are interested in technology. Like when the iPhone first came out, people say, iPhone, I want it. I want to try it. I want to give input. I want to be part of a user group and so on. Those are innovators. They're very small. There may be, I would say, 5–6%. And you can find them in some government agencies that maybe promote new technology. They attract this type of people. And so that's the first type of end user. The second type of end user is what we call the early adopters. These are people who have seen this technology work once or twice. They want to try it. They want to use it. They're happy to do a trial. And that's about 30%. And then the rest, about 2/3 of the end users, are followers. They want to use a technology that's been proven. They always ask, where has it been used? How long has it been used? How many people used it? And things like that. They're not really very open. They may do a trial, but they're not very open to pilots or trials of early technologies. So just put that into context because, as when you do technology transfer, you have to find end users to participate. So, so you don't have a lot of people running to you to do that. And then the private sector participation is very important. So this ecosystem has to bring in the private sector. It has to support the initial pilots of new technology, help evaluate trials, support and promote commercialization of these products. And so that's a very, very important part of this ecosystem. And Amine will be talking about this later in his presentation because he benefited from an ecosystem that was provided at UC Berkeley and PacTrans. So providing government funding is, of course, very important because this ecosystem would not exist if you didn't have somebody to provide seed funding for these technologies to be taken care of and to be transferred to the end user. So we have federal government, United States Department of Transportation, the National Science Foundation. Those are federal organizations that provide funding. And when I was at UC Berkeley, we got quite a bit of funding from them. But also, as you get closer to the end user, you have state DOTs, you have energy and environment. Those departments usually do help with the technology transfer, providing not only the resources, but also the people and the facilities that can help move some of these technologies closer to implementation. And then at the local levels where you really have the end users or even the districts within a state DOT, you have the headquarters, but you also have the districts. They're the one who work with the MPOs, the metropolitan planning organizations, the cities, to be able to implement these technologies. And of course, right here, I'm focusing on transportation innovation, transportation technologies, but you can, the technologies in general, could be nurtured this way and transferred this way. So I wanted to give the CCIT example, and I know Jeff just mentioned my role there. I'm still honored to have served as the founding director of that center within the University of California, with the help of Caltrans, California Department of Transportation, provided funding, but other organizations, the federal government provided funding, some private sector companies provided funding for that center. In fact, it was first called the commercialization center for ITS technologies, and then we changed it to be more broad, to be the California Center for Innovative Technologies. And that actually, the reason I was interested in helping fund that center is because of my frustrations where I worked at actually the California Department of Transportation as a manager in the new technology department, and also as the chief traffic engineer, of the chief of the division of traffic operations within Caltrans, is that we were funding a lot of research, millions of dollars of research, and a lot of it sits on the shelves and never gets implemented, and there's no really a concerted effort to take that technology and try to implement it. So I thought that a center that can bring government, academia, and the private sector together can really provide that ecosystem that can deploy transportation innovation. So we wanted to create what I call a win-win-win opportunities. And the first win is for government, because government, they provide the funding at the higher level, and they want to see results. They want to see results in improvement of safety, improvement in efficiency, so saving lives, saving time, reducing congestion, reducing the impact on the environment, and reducing the cost of implementing these technologies. So that's a government win. Then the second win is for the university, because now it's funded to create knowledge, or to help in creating knowledge, or maybe even just evaluating what the private sector brings in. And so, but the biggest win really that the university has is the students. The students are better prepared through this program to enter the workforce. And I have seen at CCIT dozens of students, masters, PhD, postdocs. A good example is Jeff. He was just talking about that. Good example is Jeff, that go out of this program and are better prepared to enter government. We have people that go work for government, people that go work for the private sector, and then people that go work for academia, and they start their own ecosystems. They go out there and work, so that the students benefit quite a bit from this program. And then the third win is for the private sector, and the private sector wins. Of course, you got profit. They're motivated by profit, but also as they get profit and they grow, they also hire more students, and they contribute back to this ecosystem by continuing to collaborate with the university, maybe funding some projects within the university, or collaborating to get National Science Foundation money, NSF money, to do projects and so on. And so these are really, this is what that CCIT was meant to be, and this is, I think, what ecosystems need to be created to do or to promote tech transfer. And so the end user participation is very, very important. And when we were at CCIT, we brought in the end user. We had to go and find the champion when possible. We focus on what I was calling the innovator and early adopter, you know, because even if you get funding from a headquarters, from let's say you get funding from cultural headquarters, you still need to find somebody in the district, an end user that is able to help you to define the user needs, be able to participate, be able to provide some level of support, like the staff and the facilities and so on, to be able to do these pilots and these trials. So that's a really important. The end user participation is very important. The initial pilot, you know, needs to be led by the lead should be either the university or the private sector. Sometimes it could be the university if it's just a project that is seeking some private sector participation, and they can attract then the private sector to come later on. Sometimes the private sector participates early on. But I think that, you know, what the ecosystem also provides is this independent evaluation by a university team also is very important. And also defining the trial is very, very important early on, not just for the university and government working together, even later when companies do business development, working with the end user and being able to do a successful trial of a technology in order to help move it towards this tech transfer, is to make sure that we define the user needs properly, the methodology that we're using, the length of test, and then what type of evaluation and what are the evaluation results, what are successful results. Those are all important things that need to be developed to be able to move forward things and be accepted by the end user and be implemented. So I wanted to move on now to some challenges. There are many challenges that we encountered when we were working at CCIT, but I think that if you can address them early on, you can resolve them. So, you know, sometimes private sector brings in a technology, they need help from this ecosystem, but they need their IP to be protected. So those things have to be protected. University sometimes provides create their own knowledge and IP, and so there are universities maybe they can share that IP with the private sector through some type of a royalty agreement and so on. But anyway, just the IP issue can be a showstopper, so it needs to be addressed early on and needs to be taken care of. I was talking earlier about government funding coming with strings attached. What I mean by that is an ecosystem that can provide some consistency in the reporting and contract management is really helpful, because if it's not consistent, and I have seen a lot, I see a whole gamut of consistency or inconsistency in where the reporting becomes a burden for the research team rather than focus on the research and so on. They spend a lot of the time and so on. And sometimes they get a contract manager that's micromanaging them. So it's very important that you know, try to relieve the burden on the research team and try to focus on the research, try to focus on the tech transfer. And also sometimes government, you know, they think, oh, we're going to fund this research, now we're going to use the IP, or we're going to say no IP, so all the government agencies can use it for free. Well, that doesn't work for the private sector, because in the private sector, you know, they want to sell things, they want to make profit. Of course, they want to help the environment and help efficiency of transportation and so on. But you can't, and in transportation especially, most of the end users are government agencies. So if you make it free for them, where's the profit? So anyway, or you know, so this is a very important thing to take on early on. Sometimes government provides some seed funding, you know, few $100,000, but when this thing is deployed in large scale, the private sector through financing spends millions and millions of dollars to make this work and to make it useful for the end user. So anyway, so I just wanted to make sure that those strings attached are kind of relaxed a little bit. And then the university has its own kind of issues that they need to resolve because a lot of university wants to create new knowledge. They want original research. They kind of look down a little bit on, you know, the applied research when private sector is bringing the knowledge. And I think that needs to be relaxed, maybe focus a lot of the master's students on the private sector research and the PhD students on creating knowledge. And, you know, so anyway, so those are things that need to be dealt with also at the level of the university. And then sole source issues are always a big issue, and you need to address them on early on with the government agencies. And I will touch on them a little bit in the next slide, because we're talking about trying to help the private sector, you know, implement this technology. So you don't want to help them early on, develop it, and then later tell them, well, it's a sole source, we can't use it, it has to be competitive. So these things have to be taken care of early on. So you know, my last slide is talking about facilitating deployment. Is private sector is going to take the lead. They're going to bear, you know, the burden of the financing, the technology development, the business development, and so on. But government can still support them in facilitating a little bit, you know, the way things are done. Like a QPL is a qualified product list. Well, the states could decide, you know, we're gonna qualify this product, and now all the cities and the MPOs and everything, everybody within the state could use it without having to retest it and so on. So you're facilitating deployment that way. The agency competitive rules, you know, the sole source, the PIF, this is public interest finding. And so what we used to do is every time sole source, you have to go to the feds, get the approval to do a sole source through sometimes of some type of evaluation, and you have to do a lot of paperwork to do that. So anyway, a lot of the agencies, they shy away from that. And so they'll buy a technology that may not be as good, that may not be as cost effective, but that's readily available and has a lot of competition. And so again, that technology transfer doesn't happen in an easy way because there is roadblocks. So over the years, I think the feds have relaxed the rules, but sometimes they don't get down to the agencies who are actually buying the stuff because they're still caught up in the way they buy things, in their competitive rules. And so the government can help relax those things. And then universities, of course, can work with government to provide independent evaluations of the technology so that they don't have to test every time they talk to a customer. So anyway, so I think facilitating deployment of technologies doesn't just end when it comes out of that ecosystem. I think the ecosystem can still help the companies work forward. So I think I'm going to stop there. The Census Network story will talk about a lot of what I talked about and can explain it in a little more details, and of course available to answer questions after. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Amine Haoui. Amine is going to talk about the Census Network story. So I'm going to, let me see here what I could do. I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to mute.
All right, thank you, Hamid. Let me share my screen. Okay, hold on. All right, well, a pleasure to be here, part of this webinar to share with you the experience of Census Networks as a startup that in the transportation field, the technology startup, which was born out of a research project at UC Berkeley. And I titled my remarks, University Fostered Business Innovation, because I'm trying to emphasize the point that key to the success of startups is technology transfer, of course, is important when it happens. But I believe that the university can offer a lot more benefits to these startups and create an environment that fosters and promotes the success of faculty, research, and students when they go out and want to start new businesses. Census Networks benefited a lot from the UC Berkeley transportation research ecosystem, which is a very rich environment here. And it was critical in the early stages to help the company, take off, and remained important throughout the life of the company, even when we were well established and successful and with a global reach. We remained very close to that community and the ecosystem of UC Berkeley. And it's a two-way street, I believe, to the extent that the company benefited from that. I believe also the ecosystem, got some benefits from having a company like Census successful. It provided an opportunity for the students, the faculty who participated, some of them on a consulting basis, some on some internship, to get some business experience, and some of them eventually were hired by the company as well. So it was a career path for many of them. So I'll start with a little bit of the Census story itself to give some context to the remarks that follow about how we worked with the ecosystem. The company was founded in 2003, and we pioneered the use of wireless sensor networking in transportation. Today, it's more referred to as IoT network or IoT, but at the time it was wireless sensor networking, the early days of that type of technology. And the idea for Census was born out of a research project by Professor Praveen Varaya at UC Berkeley, which was funded by PacTrans. At the time, PacTrans was interested in an alternative to their inductive loops, which, as you probably know, are wires in the pavement used to measure traffic flow and detect vehicles. They're prone to failure because the pavement can fail, and they wanted Professor Varaya to see if there are more reliable alternatives that can provide the same kind of accuracy of data. At the time, these were the early days, there was new generation of very low power radios, low power sensors, better batteries. So the idea of having a battery operated wireless sensor to provide the same data as the inductive loop was what Praveen investigated. And the early results were promising. He was working with a couple of his students, and they put sensors on the roadway and did some early experiments. It looked very promising. At which point, Praveen, being a personal friend of mine, we decided to team up together with Dr. Robert Cavalier, the CTO of Census, to start the company. The point here is that, two experienced entrepreneurs, myself and Robert Cavalier, having started two companies before this one, teaming up with a faculty member who brings the domain expertise and the depth of knowledge, is a powerful combination. I think it helps to have the experience on the business side as well, to teaming up with the domain expertise that Praveen brought. And I highly recommend to bring in the business expertise, entrepreneurship expertise early on, because it's hard to learn on the job, especially when you have to raise quite a bit of money. In fact, we end up raising $25 million in venture capital. And that's another point that I want to make, that it's easy to underestimate how much money it takes to build these companies successfully, especially in transportation. The product development will take a lot more time and money than you initially think, because you are at the interface of human drivers together with the infrastructure. It's a very, very complex interface. And to get the products to the level of performance that makes them useful to the practitioners that makes them accurate enough for the traffic operations or data collection, it takes quite a bit longer than you think. And then you have the product approval process that Hamid touched on. Unfortunately, in the US, there is no centralized mechanism to get the product approved nationwide. You end up having to do it with almost every agency independently. And so we end up doing probably 30 or 40 independent pilots and trials and product approval. And sometimes the cycle will go a couple of years because they want to see it through various seasons. And so that adds quite a bit of expense to the undertaking. And you're also entering a very competitive market. So sales and marketing expenses are higher than you think to be able to create a brand for yourself. And it is a very relationship-based sale. You need to, to have feet on the ground. You need to have good distribution to be able to reach the customers. So all this adds up to quite a bit of money. And I'm mentioning that because unless you're aware of the amount of money to raise, you may end up losing all your equity raising the capital if you don't do it properly. So be aware that you need to raise quite a bit of money. And we raised that money, and today, we have become the global leader in wireless sensing for traffic application. And we are used by many cities, including some of the largest in the world: San Francisco, Seattle, New York, London, Johannesburg, and a very broad range of application, from traffic signal control to freeway data monitoring to parking applications. And in 2019, we had a successful exit. We're now part of a larger corporation called Tagmaster. They're European-based. But we continue the journey. Sensys continuing to address the growing market for data and traffic data and detection. And throughout our life as a company, we had a very close tie to UC Berkeley. So we were born in that vibrant ecosystem, which is the Berkeley transportation research community around the campus. And to give you a sense of the various entities, of course, you have the leading ITS group on campus of world-renowned faculty and students doing some very advanced research and with an amazing reputation. We were fortunate at the time to have CCIT, the group that Hamid mentioned earlier that he founded on campus, and whose role was to help companies like Sensys navigate the PacTrans maze and help PacTrans adopt new technology. And they played a very critical role in the early days, and first helping us define the product by introducing us to the right people at PacTrans, but also conducting the first performance evaluation on the freeway and writing an extensive report that was an important stepping stone towards the PacTrans approval eventually that happened a couple of years after that. There also was the, PATH is a big part of that ecosystem. PATH is probably one of the largest research centers in transportation in the world. And having access to the researchers there and the projects and their openness to help you and to educate you on the industry and the requirements was phenomenal. And PATH, in addition to being a center, they also are in the Richmond Field Station with their facilities were very beneficial to Sensys, including a very large pavement test machine. So we happen to have a need to test the sensors in the pavement. So we're able to do it in that, there are only 2 or 3 of them in the world. We had access to that pavement test machine, so we could apply the truck loads on the sensors to see how long they last in the pavement. We also had access to an intersection that they had, so we could install our equipment. All that is, irreplaceable, for a small company. But ultimately, I think the biggest value that this ecosystem provided us is what Hamid mentioned, which is access to the customers, because of relationship between UC and PacTrans and between PATH and PacTrans and the researchers there, we were able to meet and get a lot of generous time from the key people within PacTrans at MTC, San Francisco Department of Transportation, and be able to better understand the requirements and build products that they actually need as opposed to products that we think they need. So very powerful environment to foster the success of a startup. Having said this, I think it is important that some boundaries be defined between the startup and the ecosystem. We were always off campus, and I'm a strong believer in that because companies have developed their own personalities, their own culture. Doing product development is different from doing research, and so we need to have an arm's length relationship with the university. In terms of technology transfer, in our case, initially we considered using the technology developed by Ravin and his students, but the mesh protocol that they had come up with, unfortunately, it turned out not to be power efficient enough for our needs, so end up going in a different direction using a point to multipoint architecture. So we did not license the IP, and we made sure that any IP developed by the company is funded by the company, so there is no potential confusion at that point. And in terms of benefit to the campus, having Sensy as a growing startup provide the opportunity for many students to consult with us, students and faculty, I have to say, consult with us, work on some of our projects as interns in summer, and eventually we end up hiring several of the students. We also had a few joint research projects with the campus where we applied together for funds, including a recent one, which is still ongoing, which is an ARPA-E funded joint research to develop autonomous vehicle type application. And so a close relationship beneficial both to the ecosystem, but when the company becomes also successful, it's beneficial to the ecosystem as well. In terms of fundraising for transparent startup in an area in which I have a lot of experience, I'd like to start by saying that the venture community is not very, very fond of companies that sell to government for the following reasons. First of all, you have a very, very conservative customer that doesn't have a financial incentive to innovate, which makes it a lot longer to get going as a company than you would otherwise. The fact that there is no centralized approval process and makes the product approval a lot more complex and more expensive is also another reason why VCs don't like that space too much. Very long sales cycles. Sometimes, it takes a couple of years to go from concept to bid, and then another year to bid it. And so sometimes that is a big impediment. And ultimately, transportation does not, typically transportation is a slow growth environment, right? And so, which is also not typical profile for a VC. So what I highly recommend that when you go out to raise money, that you target firms, VC firm, venture firms that are affiliated with, transportation companies, the OEMs, have their own venture funds. Ford has one, GM has one, they all have their own venture fund, but also a lot of the large technology players like Cisco and Siemens and what have you, they have their own venture funds. And for Sensy, Siemens was the anchor funder. And once you have money from one of these strategic, make it easier to go after the VC community. I also highly recommend that you start with very realistic business plans. It will take you longer in transportation to start showing revenue traction. And if you acknowledge that in your business plan, I think it will be appreciated by the funders, and it will lead to a more harmonious relationship between you and your investors. And my most important advice is to use as little cash as possible, especially initially, because it takes quite a long time to get these companies off the ground. Once they're off the ground, I think you can start spending money at a faster clip, because you will know what you are doing and what you can expect in terms of revenue growth. So with that, I will, I stop sharing my screen. Hold on. And we can turn it over to the Q&A. Jeff, you want to take over?
Oh, yes. Thank you, Hamid and Amine. This is great presentations, and thank you both. I personally learned a lot. Those are very insightful, and also reminded me of the good days at CCIT and Berkeley. I just wanted to remind the participant, if you have questions, please insert them as the Q&A button or menu over there. You click them, you can see. We are now in the panel discussion and the questions answer session. So I already see 3 questions in the Q&A box. So I'm going to read them one by one. I think the first one is if an academic researcher created a new technology and considering commercialization. So I think the question is how you balance between or decide between you approach a company that can purchase your technology or you create your own company. How you balance these 2 options, I guess. Amine, maybe you have more experience on this?
Yeah, I'll take it. So I think it really depends on the type of technology that you are talking about. If it is better, I mean, so the hurdles to enter this market are significant. If the potential for this technology is very unique and large, so that a new team is best suited to take it to market, I think starting a company should be considered. If it is an augmentation of what is already being done by other companies, they already have distribution for it, they understand the need, and you're just adding something to their portfolio that does not require to create the new market opportunity, I think you're better off teaming up with them and having a license it so that they can take it to market. It's more cost effective that way than having to create a whole new organization to do it. So I think it just depends on the type of technology that you are talking about and its market potential.
Great, thank you. Hamid, you have anything to add to that, or?
Well, I think that's why it's important to have that ecosystem I was talking about, is to be able to have the private sector participate in some of these, so attract them and see. But I think Amine covered it, but I think you need to consider that if you're going to start a new company, you need a team. You need to have a team. You need to have an Amine, like Census Networks. The story of Census Network, they started a new company, so you had a faculty member, or it could be a student, but it could be a faculty member, who reached out in his network to people who have done that before. And so you need to bring an Amine Haoui, and you need to bring somebody like a Robert Cavalier, who's the other founder of Census, that really have done it before to be able to help navigate through those things. But then at the same time, depending on which area you're doing it, whether it's consumer or whether it's transportation, whether you're selling to a government agency, you need to also get the people who have the information and experience to do it. So either way, I think the easy way, of course, is just get a company who does this type of technology and work with them and try to do it that way, because they already have a whole network, like Amine was saying, of distribution and folks that can help you do it. But starting a new company, I mean, it's not easy, but it's maybe more fruitful for you. But you need to have a couple of people to join you that have the experience that can move it forward faster.
All right. Thank you both. The next question is, where does one go to find a business partner if you have a new technology? So what are the experiences of doing this?
I mean, you can talk about that because you have a lot of experience in the field. And where did Praveen find you, right? Through the contacts and so on. But again, I want to make it very important to understand that having that ecosystem can help all these things. So I mean, I'm going to let you take.
So my recommendation in this case is, if you have a good business idea and the beginning of a business plan, one of the best way to find potential entrepreneurs that can help you is by actually presenting to the VC community, even though they are a tough audience and they may not necessarily be enamored with this space. They are connected to a network of entrepreneurs, sometimes in residence entrepreneurs at these firms that have started companies before, and they are probably the best source for talent that can help you launch the company. I think in general, what Hamid was saying, extensive networking is key here. So the more you expose your idea to people and the more you network about it, I think you will find that the talent who might be interested in doing it will show up, right? So that's.
All right. Yeah. Thank you for that advice. I'm going to skip the third question, but that's to the PacTrans leadership. Jump to the fourth question first, which is, what's your key advice to people who are interested to carry research product to market from your own experience? What are the key lessons learned in this process?
So I would say the starting point is what Hamid touched upon, is I think it is important to have the right team with the right experience to start a company, right? I mean, if it is research coming out of campus and you're able to attract the right team, I think is the most critical first step. It is the talent and the experience of the people starting the company that do it. The second is to be extremely realistic about the market opportunity. We tend to all want to believe what we think, but in reality, unless you expose the idea very early on to potential customers and practitioners, you don't know what you don't know. And so I think the second biggest step is to make sure that you're not barking up the wrong tree, that you're not running, that the idea really has some merit and that the technology has some merit and some interest in the market. I think that would be the second most important thing to do, to be realistic about what, is there a business there or there is no business? More often than not, what you think is not reality, it is what the customer thinks that is reality, right? So these are,
Thank you. There's a question for PacTrans leadership about the priorities of tech transfer. So we have our director, Professor Yinghai Wang here. Maybe Yinghai, you can answer that.
Well, I think today's the key topic is actually the webinar speakers, but I will just take a minute to answer this question. You know, PacTrans is US DOT funded University Transportation Center. US DOT really wants to get some practical technologies from UTC research, and therefore US DOT's top priority is also PacTrans' top priority. The problem is we must have a technology before we can move to technology transfer. So PacTrans has been spending time trying to cultivate new technologies. So in this FAST Act funded University Transportation Center, it's a 5-year grant. So you will see we emphasize more and more on technology transfer in the years to come. So this is the last year, but it's get extended. So maybe this year, next year is going to be our top priority. Thank you.
Thank you, Yinghai. The next question is from our colleagues from WASTA. Mustafa, thank you for the question. Question about, you know, here we are mainly talking about university and private sector innovations, but there are 5% of innovators who work in the government agencies. There are constraints, right? As you just outlined in your presentation. What's your kind of advice to address those issues and also start innovation in the government?
So I think I'll take that one, Jeff. But I think that it's very important for the Department of Transportation to promote new technology, to have a new technology program, to reserve some funding for new technology, to be able to provide that funding focused on tech transfer and so on. And I think that if a transportation agency is advertising that they have a new technology program that open to creating and to help create new technology to improve, let's say, transportation safety and efficiency and so on, I think that will attract some of those innovators to come in and work for government because they want to participate into a program like that. They want to work with researchers, they want to work with private sectors, and they want to be part of a team that's creating something. That's what innovators want. Like I was telling earlier, when the first iPhone, comes out, people, a lot of people say, what is it? I don't know. The other people, just let me see it. Let me play with it. Let me work with it. But anyway, so the innovators, they would be attracted to government if government signals that they are open to creating, new technologies, to helping do the technology transfer and so on. So I think that's really key to attracting the folks. I mean, it helps, of course, to pay them well, because government doesn't pay well, so it's good. But a lot of time, some people are really more attracted by the technology, by the role that they have in providing their input into the technology. And I have seen some of those people in government, then they are motivated by the money, right? So I think that one key point is what I just said is the DOTs need to signal to the people that they want to hire that they're open to the innovation and new technology and creating programs that nurture that.
Oh, great. Thank you, Hamid. There's the next question is, I think the emerging issue that under the current political circumstances, there are more, restrictions and risks between the academia communities and the, foreign and international companies. So what's your suggestion about this? Like if a university researcher sees the product may be better, collaborate with a foreign company, then what's are the concerns or risks they may face?
I think I'll let Amine maybe can provide, but I think that it's a global, technology is global. When we were at the university, we worked with foreign companies, and we had agreements with France, for example, to do research on both sides of, and PacTrans actually contributed to that, being able to have companies that could do research overseas. We do research rather than duplicate researchers, work together. And I think the university is key to bringing those relationships together. Having a university in one country, another university, another country, sharing results and so on. That's very important. On the business side, I'm going to let Amine talk about that, because he is actually, the company that acquired Sensy Networks is a foreign company. So Amine can talk about that.
So I mean, is the question about the startup phase of the company, if the collaboration is international, what do you do, or what's the question exactly, Jeff?
I'm assuming it's about the early stage, right? Because they want to do innovation, and then sometimes maybe a collaboration with a foreign company is the best path forward, but there's also always some restriction on that. That's my sort of understanding from the question.
Yeah, so my perspective on for a young startup company in the US, what you're doing is really complex enough. It's better not to add an international dimension to it from the get-go, because it adds expense and it adds complexity. I think it is better to try to find the partners locally. Now, if the only possible partner, is international, I think there is no reason why you wouldn't pursue it. I think today, of course, there are some global tensions, as mentioned, so one has to be wise about how you go about doing stuff. But we had successful partnership in the partnership with an Australian university in the early days that was very fruitful for the company. Clearly, it can work, and it was a collaboration that was ultimately very important for us to open the Australian market. But it's also, not my first choice. The first choice would be to try to stay domestically, because you only have so many resources as a small company, and you want to try to maximize, the impact of these resources. Yeah.
Thank you. It sounds like you have a good legal advisor from day one regarding this. We have two more questions. I hope we could cover those. The first one is, I think this one is quite interesting. Like transportation has this very strong public flavor. Government agencies provide funding to do research. Has a kind of implication of trying to serve public goods, but private sector, they try to revenue driven in that regard. So how you balance the two? I think that's also related.
I think Jeff, the way you balance the two is a government provides this very small seed funding, right, to be able to attract the private sector to invest in government, right, in a technology that would ultimately benefit the government and benefit the safety of people, save lives, save time, save the environment, and so on. So the government, that is their idea, is to do that. Now, in order to implement that idea, the lion's share of the effort is going to be coming from the private sector. So that funding should be focused on attracting the private sector so they can spend the big money, so they can implement the technology that can ultimately benefit the people and benefit the government's goals, which is to improve safety and, to reduce congestion, reduce the impact on the environment, right? So there should be no strings attached from that funding to the profit of the company, because that company is spending a whole lot of money and they need to get the profit from the money. They get investors and so on. So I think that government, if they don't understand it already, should understand that what they're putting in is to attract people. That little money they put in, like the $25,000 that Amine was talking about, then he raised $25 million, okay? So you see how big, so the government need to spend that money to initiate the research and then let the private sector take it and spend the big money and then make profit from that and not have any strings attached.
Great. Maybe I follow up on this is, when you have in transportation research, when you have an innovation, sometimes you have to decide, should I do an IP or patent application or not? I think sometimes having an IP or patent could prevent the users of using that, because the cities or DOTs are the customers, maybe the largest customers. If you have an IP or patent, it's sort of prevent them from using your product or technology, right? So how to balance, or when is the right time to apply for those kind of IP?
Well, I mean, you're talking about the private
From
company having the IP.
Yeah, the university researcher point of view.
Again, it's if it's a private sector that have the IP, I mean, they use their own money to develop it, so they should. The cities can buy it from them, and they should make the profit, right? That's not an issue. So I think spending this little bit of money from the government, they need to have the big picture that the private, it's to attract, because that company could be doing something else, could be doing consumer products that are way out of transportation. So if we want to attract people to benefit the public good, we need to invest a little bit of money, some seed money, to bring them in so they can spend the big money to get the goal again, which is improve the environment and improve safety, right? I mean, so the IP issue should be with the private sector. I mean, and if the IP was created at the university, they need to work with the private sector to be able to, whether they get royalties or they become their own company and so on. But that government funding should not have strings attached to slow down technology transfer, to slow down the improvements to the environment and to safety and to reducing congestion. I mean, that's really should be a very clear point for the government.
So Jeff, my perspective, is the following. I think the university should focus. I don't think they should be too worried about patents and IP. I think they should be focused on, instead of developing IP, developing their people. There is a lot more value in developing the talent and promoting the success of your talent, whether it's research or faculty, as they start companies, than it is to create a particular patent, which is a hit or miss, right? And so I think there is a lot more leverage and value and potential future benefit from a successful, companies that start from the intellectual wealth of the university as opposed to a particular patent, in my perspective.
Thank you. Due to the time, we have to wrap up. There's the last question about the end user participation. Should we first target on innovators or early adopters and then followers, if that's the process?
Well, I think the innovators, I think innovators that, and mainly the early adopters, the early adopters are really the key. The followers, they're not going to do trials. They're very, so those, they will buy the product later. So don't worry about those. I think you need to worry more about the early implementers, the innovators. Those are the ones who are going to help you, in the process to take tech transfer to the field.
So I would agree with that, but I would add something. It's important to talk to as many people as possible, even skeptical people and the followers, because you will learn from them stuff that an innovator may not tell you. So target the innovator for your pilot, for your initial deployment, because they will help you. Target as many people as you can for the product requirement and the definition, because you need the skeptical people as well, because they bring a perspective that you don't want to miss.
Oh, thank you very much, Hamid and Amine. So due to time constraints, we have to close the.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for all the participation.
Thank you, everybody. It was a pleasure.
Okay, bye-bye.
Give back to Cole to formally close the webinar.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. That was really great. For our audience, this was recorded, and we've already had a number of inquiries for the recordings, and so we'll make those available on our YouTube channel and on our website. And then stay tuned with us through Facebook and LinkedIn about future webinars. This has been really great and insightful, and I want to thank all of you very much for your participation on this. So without further ado, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Both of you.
Bye-bye. Take care.